Hi, this is Santosh Kumar, your host for RunYogi Diaries, Pondering while Wandering. In this show, I want to bring you stories of ordinary people with extraordinary journeys. For most parts, this will be oriented around running, endurance sports, ultra hiking, ultra bicycling, triathlons, but we will cover a wide variety of topics. So let's see who's on the show today. Welcome to today's show, episode number 3 on Run Yogi Diaries, Pondering While Wandering. I have a very exciting guest this afternoon. Uh, he's a friend of mine for over close to 3 decades. Yeah, we are that old. Okay. Don't judge us for that, okay? Um, and he is in our friend circle. We call him the Energy Bunny. And the joke is that I think when he was born, he fell into a pail of steroids, and the energy just hasn't dissipated. He is a ardent ultra cyclist, a passionate photographer, a great human being, and I want to welcome to the show Sriram Varadarajan. Sriram,
Hey, all right. Can you see me?
yes,
Good. Hey, thanks for having me on the show, Santosh.
yeah, welcome to the show. It's great having you here. You have a lot to offer. You've been up to some terrific journeys in your life of different kinds, especially on the saddle. And we're going to talk about all of that, and we'll have the viewers learn a few tricks of how you do it. So let's get to it, right?
Yep.
So Sriram, I'd like you to go ahead and introduce yourself, your background, where you come from. Have you been cycling all your life, or is that joke true that you fell in a pail of steroids when you were born? Tell us all about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think like you started off, right? You and I go back a long ways. I have a very similar background like you. Born and raised in Bengaluru, one of my favorite cities. We moved to the States 2001. So we've been here about 20 years. Um, yeah, no, I mean, I think from a cycling standpoint, I started I have some photographs that kind of point out the date, but one never forgets the first time you get on a bike, right? And so for me, I think I was about 4 or 5 years old. I was living in Indranagar, and I still remember the first day I got the bike was my dad bought it from a neighbor. It was a small Norton, bike. It was a replica of, the standard Indian bikes, and so literally, the day I got it, I was in love with it. And I was so excited and made sure that I learned how to ride it that first day. Um, and no, ever since I've never looked back. I mean, I used to go to school like first grade. Went to a school called New Horizon School in Indranagar. They didn't even have a place to put your bike in the school. So I would ride and put it in a friend of my dad had a house next to the school. And so I'd park it there, go to school. And all of this was like I was in first grade. So you can imagine how excited I was to just ride the bike, right? So no, ever since, I've kind of grown always being around a bicycle. I think, of course, my memories faded a little bit, but thanks to Facebook and WhatsApp and being connected to all my school friends, high school and middle school friends and college friends back in Bangalore, they tell me all the stories about how I would teach them how to ride a bike, and how I would take them on all these adventures. Right, we'd go. I mean, Bangalore was a very different place those days, but we lived in Indranagar, Alsur, that whole area, and so we'd ride from there to the old airport and beyond. There was a place called Bellandur Lake that we'd go to all the time, or go to Whitefield, or go to Bannerghatta, and all of these, far off places. I mean, we didn't think much of just getting on and riding on the street with all the traffic and the lack of rules and everything. And I think those memories still kind of hold out. So yeah, no, I mean, I've always I guess liked to ride. I mean, just to be outside and enjoy the slow motion view, if you will, of being on a bicycle and, and enjoying the
Right.
outdoor.
Yeah, and the other thing common we have between us is pretty long last names, right? I have 14 letters in my last name. I counted yours, you have 11.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with TSA? What's the favorite question?
Well, I make a joke of it for the most part because, sometimes even, me saying my own name, it doesn't roll very easily, right? And so I always kind of make a joke of it, make light of it. I know that it's hard for people to pronounce it. I had a boss that once called me V-Man, just so he could avoid saying my last name. I also have a lot of people just call me 5 A's because I have 5 A's in my last name. So, yeah, it's really a lighthearted. I mean, I'm not that anal about how my name is pronounced or it's a name. So I'm cool with it.
Yeah, my favorite. Initially, when I was asked to pronounce my name in the airport security check, I would initially feel uncomfortable, and then I figured I would just embrace it. And now, when somebody asks me, I say, "Hey, I have a world record," and everybody just breaks out in laughter, and it's all done. So, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, absolutely. So that's a great story. I know. I think all of us, our first bikes has always been a favorite bike, and many of us have ridden bicycles when we were kids. But you are different, and why you are different is you have taken on a journey into ultra bicycling. You do really long rides, and you live in the mountain country of this country. Um, and you've ridden a few of those triple bypass rides, which first time I heard, I found it very funny. I was like, is that like a way to wake up people to get healthy, right?
Yeah.
You've done multi-day long rides, and so you are used to sitting on the saddle for a very long time. So first of all, what got you into?
Sorry. There's an alarm going off, some Amber Alert. Sorry about that. Yeah.
What got you into such long distance riding? And it's a different ball game. It's not the same as commuter bike riding, right? So talk a little bit about what got you into that.
That's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about it that much, but I'll tell you a story, right? So when we first moved to the States, this was back in 2001, we went and lived in, as you know, we lived in California for a few years. We lived in Cupertino. And so it was a very interesting time for me because I was kind of, drinking from a fire hose, right? Just about everything was new. Learning to drive in the States was new. Making friends, learning how to work here, just about, making friends and neighbors. Every piece of life was interesting, in terms of just, man, it's so different. And, you're always nervous. You're like, you want to do the best you can and so on and so forth. So I think in the time before that, living in, working in India, I'll tell you that I think my lifestyle was pretty unhealthy. We'd work long hours and then we'd hit the bars and then we'd party over the weekends. And so went through about 6 or 7 years of basically no activity, no exercise, right? And then we moved to the States, and life is very different. All of a sudden, it's not often that you go to the bars after work. You do work, and then you kind of, if you had kids that were really small, so you spend some time sort of, entertaining them. So it's, a much more cookie cut kind of a lifestyle, where we had time sort of set aside for everything. And on the weekends, I was starting to get bored. I said, okay, I got to go find something to do. So I started playing tennis and started getting back into things that I like to do. And then, I would see all these people on a bicycle. I'm like, man, that sounds like so much fun, especially because, in America, I think the roads, the way they make room for a cyclist, it's so friendly, it's so bicycle friendly. And so you can just get on a bike, feel safe, and explore, right? And so that appealed to me. And then I bought a bike. I bought like a hybrid bike that was my first bike. And, it kicked my butt, right? So the first day I got on it and I rode, I couldn't ride my bike over, these bridges over like the highway, just a little climb up and maybe 200 yards of an incline like that. And, I had to stop and get off and push the bike over, right? for me, I felt so humiliated having to do that. And so, and I'm a competitive guy, and I said, shit, this sucks. I got to do something about that. And so I started riding. And the cool thing about riding for me, which I always tell people, is that you ramp up really fast. So, you might be able to ride 1 mile barely one day, and then 3 days later, you're like riding 5, 6, 8, 10 miles. And pretty soon you're riding 25 miles. And 25 miles is a good amount of distance, right? And so that's kind of how I began. And within the first 6 months, I outgrew that hybrid bike. And I went and got myself a proper road bike, which I got sized to me. And that then turned on a whole slew of new opportunities. And Cupertino, where we lived in California, was pretty close to the sort of mountains there. So a lot of avenues to climb, get away into sort of quieter roads, and just, it was very meditative, just being out there. And so literally, I kind of went from not being able to ride 200 yards over a little bunny hill to 25 to 50 miles within a matter of 3 to 4 months, right? And have not looked back since then. And so, of course, one thing leads to another, and I used to sign up for a lot of these metric centuries and regular centuries. And so I remember doing my first metric century was in Napa Valley. So that, again, it felt like a great achievement. And so you just grow from there, right? And it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, so for some people who are listening to this who are probably starting off on their, endurance sports journey, there are a few terminologies that we can talk about. One is, you talked about sizing your bike. You talked about metric century. Right. So metric century is 160 miles, 100 kilometers bike ride. And there are a lot of these rides that happen throughout the country, and people who want to train for it can go out and train for it. But let's talk about sizing the bike, because that's one question most people have when they are thinking about biking. One is, biking is an expensive hobby.
Sure.
Yes, it looks good, right? So let's talk about that. So when you look at all these super cool bicyclists going zoom past your car, sometimes when you go in the mountains and you're looking at it and saying, wow, I wish I would like to do that. The next thing that you do, go to a bike store and you find out, well, there is a cost involved in these bikes. And there is also a science behind getting the right bicycle. And I know you are a passionate, not just a bicyclist, but you also take care of your bicycle. So for someone who wants to start on this, right, what is your recommendation? Where should they start? How would they, what is your recommendation?
First of all, bicycling doesn't have to be an expensive hobby. Okay. That's of course, any hobby you can take, especially in America, you can take it to the nth degree and kind of spend obscene amounts of money on it, right? So so cycling is like that. People start fretting about milligrams, and at some point it's a point of diminishing return, right? And so I've had bikes across the spectrum, and of course, I would only advise people to spend a lot of money on it once you're really into it. Otherwise, you're going to be parking a lot of money and not having much use for it. So, having said that, I think you can start off relatively low. I mean, again, low is what I'm saying is a relative term, but so for about $1,500, you can get a really good quality bicycle today. It could be, fitted with carbon frame, carbon forks, and light bike, so, and the components are not shabby at all. So that's a low point of entry, according to me. I mean, if you're kind of wanting to do something, $1,500 is not a tremendous amount of money. But sizing, you brought up sizing, right? So one of the most important things, one of the things that people tend to not pay too much attention to is, a lot of people just go off and buy a bike, right? But if you're spending anything more than an hour or 2 or 3 on a bicycle, and you want to avoid injury, you want to kind of, enjoy it, I think a key principle there is to make sure that it's proper. You wouldn't buy a shoe that doesn't fit you, right? Similarly, you shouldn't buy a bicycle that doesn't fit you. So the good thing with the bikes is, once you've got a ballpark size, it's relatively easy to make finer adjustments. You can move the seat forward, backward. You can move the handlebar forward, backward, move the seat up and down. But at a core level, the bike should be about your size. That's right for your size. Then the fine tuning can happen, and as your body stretches with riding, you can continue to adjust that so that you're always fit well on the bike. Because I've had situations where when you do long rides, you could have knee pain, you could, so the little things that tend to become a big bother that will ultimately stop you from getting on the bike. So to me, it's super important. And fitting a bike is a relatively simple process. If you go to a bike shop, usually they do it they'll do a basic fitting for you as long as you buy the bike from them. They don't charge you. But then if you want a professional fit, it's about $150, but that's money really well spent. So I always advise people that get into road biking, especially because the road bike has multiple positions where you can, hold the handlebar, on the hood, on the, and so you want to make sure that those are all sized well so that every position is comfortable and you don't end up with, lower back pain or, tendinitis of your elbows or your patella, your knees. So those are the major sort of, areas where you tend to have injuries doing sort of like a repetitive injury, when you're doing something a lot. So if you're sized well, then you won't have that.
Right. And I think, and especially long distance bike riding, you tend to be on the saddle for 2 hours, 3 hours, and you're on the road. You're also looking to pick up some speed. So a lot of folks, there's always this fundamental question on, should I buy a hybrid bike? Should I go to a Walmart and buy? What's the difference between buying a bike in, let's say, a local, sports store versus going to a branded bike store, which has brands like, Cannondale, Rallies, and, I think you have something called Osprey, if I remember.
I have an Orbea. It's a Spanish bike.
Right. So there is a whole myriad of opportunity or chance, choices.
You go to a shop and, oh my gosh, so many choices.
Right.
It can be very intimidating, but I'd say start small always.
Right.
The best thing to do is initially start asking yourself some questions, right? What kind of terrain do I think I'm going to ride? What kind of distances? And usually when you start, your answers to those questions are going to be somewhat conservative, right? Nobody's going to start off and say, okay, I want to ride 100 miles.
Yeah.
Usually, I want to ride around the neighborhood. I want to go to the local park. And once you feel the air and you're out there and out in the open, you start to enjoy it. And then it becomes a passion. So I would almost say, to a lot of people, start maybe even with a used bike or borrow a friend's bike. Just do that for a couple of weeks, see how you like it. And my philosophy of buying in general might be different from somebody else. I like to spend, how do I put this without sounding weird, right? I'd rather put good money on something, than do it multiple times. So I tend to do some research and, make sure that, okay, here's how much money I want to spend, and I might stretch that a little bit, but I'll try to get the best I can at that point. And of course, a few years down the road, you want to get better than that, but that's normal.
Right. And I think you touched upon a couple of points. You talked about, you used the interesting word carbon, right? And for a lot of folks who are listening to this, so bikes come and made with different materials. Right. Traditionally, olden days, bikes used to be made of aluminum or steel. And so I have a bicycle. Mine, my bicycle is not a very expensive bicycle. I have a Felt F85. I've had it for like over 10 years now. Of course, I don't ride as much as you do, but I've had a few MS 150 rides and a few Century rides, and it's lasted me quite a bit. And it has a aluminum frame, but it has parts of it are carbon. It's not a full carbon bicycle. It cost me about $1,200. And then there are bikes that if you went all carbon, it can go to $3,000, $5,000. So I think just to kind of summarize what you were saying, you can start, if you're going to do a moderate amount of road bicycling, you can start with about $1,200, and you can go all the way to $10,000. There's no limit because technology is moving so fast, and you get used to pedaling faster. And always wear a helmet.
Oh, you bet. Yeah, you have to be safe. Again, on that point of helmet and safety, bicyclists have a bad rap, right? They tend to break the rules. They don't stop at stop signs. They run through a red light. They think that laws of motorists don't apply to them. And this is to me, it's a pet peeve because it's like a couple of bad apples kind of give the whole a fruit basket a bad rap, right? And so I always like to follow the rules, make sure that I tell somebody that's not following the rules to follow the rules. Helmet, same thing. The speeds that you can go at on a bike are crazy. I mean, I've been on my bike at 55 miles an hour on several occasions. Wow. 55 miles an hour on a bicycle feels so scary because a little rock can send you flying. It can be really dangerous, right? And so, especially going down. So, helmet, follow the rules, and tell everybody that you see that's not following the rules to follow the rules. So, yeah.
I remember I was once in Denver, and you took me on a ride, literally, and we went on this ride up the mountain. And obviously, I'm from the flatlands of this country, and you live in the mountains. And you said, "Hey, let's go for a ride." And this was the evening, and you got me a bicycle of someone, which was obviously not my size. It was a steel bicycle, but we said, let's do it for fun, and we went. And well, first off, you were on, as I said, again, I'm joking about this, guys. Obviously, Sriram is a clean guy. He does not consume steroids, but you were literally, metaphorically on steroids, and you just went past Zoom on the mountain. And I'm like, how did he generate that level of power? And I am struggling to climb those hills. Okay, so that's part one of the story. So we somehow get up to wherever we got up, and when we turned back, and we were hitting 35, 40 miles per hour, and this damn bike did not have brakes.
Yeah,
I remember feeling like I'm going to crash into something any moment, and it was such a interesting experience. I completely agree with you. I think that's another reason you need a good bicycle if you're.
And you have to keep things sharp, right? For sure. And by the way, I think you did really well for somebody that came from flatland, never rode a bike, and we took you up some pretty gnarly, climbs. I remember Jiva, you and I went. So no, you did. I think you're somebody that's in good shape. So, but yeah, no, climbing has always been a passion for me. For me, I like the quiet mountains. It's very meditative, and it's a competitive nature in me that wants to keep doing better every time I get out there. So no, it's all good. From a cycling, just to come back to your point about cycles and what kind of bikes, carbon's become a lot less they used to be very expensive to make before, but just because everybody's gotten into it, I guess the volumes made it a lot less expensive. So there are a lot of options there where you can buy a carbon bike for under $2,000. I think the components, meaning, your gears and shifters and derailleurs and brakes and all of that, those things are, you can be very, people get pretty obsessive over those. Those can add up pretty penny to the cost. But again, at a very fundamental level, a bicycle is a simple machine. It's been, the fundamentals of a bike haven't changed in like 30 or 40 years.
Right.
And I think a simple bike, maintain it well, will keep you going for a lot of good time. Yeah. So
right.
Will treat you well.
And I think the point you make about parts of the bike, that's a good response to the question, why should I buy a good bike versus why don't I just go to a supermarket and buy a bike for $200, right? I think it comes back down to that point you made, which is the gears and the shifters. When you're out there riding 40, 30, 40, 50, 60 miles, 2-3 hours out there, if your gears break, it's a pain. So you need those parts to work well. And that investment you make is just so that you can have a pleasurable experience in out there on the road when you do those long rides. Now, if you're just riding 5-10 miles to the park, you don't need those kind of bicycles. So we are here talking about endurance bicycling. We're talking about bicycling kind of like the way you do it, right? Which is you ride in 60 miles, 80 miles, multi-day rides, right? That's just so that we set context for people who are listening to this.
Yeah. And reminds me of fun times back when we grew up in India, right? I used to have a bicycle where the crank would be slightly bent because I fell down and so a little warped, and so you ride it, but literally every 100 yards the chain would slip off, and I'd have to stop. And so how annoying is something like that? And that's why the components and the precision of those components are going to be pretty important to make sure that you don't ruin your day.
Yeah. That leads to me to the next point. You talked about climbing mountains, and climbing mountains means creating a strength. It needs strength on your legs or whatever. I don't know what do you guys do to generate that level of power in those mountains, because everybody is not able to do it. So what do you do? Do you do core exercises? Do you do strengthening? What kind of exercise do you recommend for somebody who wants to get faster and stronger on bicycles?
Well, for me, I mostly ride. Okay, that's for me. That's my main form of sort of training. Although I will say that at the beginning of the season, so I go through maybe 1 or 2 months where, maybe even 3 months where I don't ride a lot. It's usually between, say, October, November through maybe early part of January. January, usually New Year resolutions kick in, and I usually sign up for something. So I start pretty early in January to at least start training. But anyway, in January, I'm sort of coming off of 3 months of relatively low cycling activity, right? And so I try and keep myself at least somewhat strong. I'll do some weight training. But things like squats, I think you just want to keep your hamstrings and quads in shape, because that's what you use a lot while riding. Other than that, cross training can help. I mean, I find that when I, in the off months, I'll run a little bit, not any distance like you do, but, short distances, 2 miles, 3 miles, for me, that just keeps up the sort of aerobic fitness that I want. But really the way I ramp up is I'll get on an indoor trainer, I'll go to a spin class, usually starting in January. So usually at the end of December, January 1st, I have 2 really good friends of mine here that are both cyclists. I'm very lucky to have them as buddies. And so we typically sign up, for some big long ride in the summer, right? Like the triple bypass. And so once you put a stake in the ground, you're like, okay, you want to train for that, right? And so we'll start doing spin classes, we'll start doing indoor training. And, Colorado is blessed with some decent weather, even in Jan and Feb. So occasionally we'll get out and, enjoy the outdoors, even in Jan. If it's like 50 degrees outside, it's pretty easy to ride and you'll have a good time. So for me, mostly I start to ramp up, Jan, Feb, I'll do maybe around 200 to 300 miles a month, right? And then come March, I'll try to ramp to 300 to 400 miles a month. And then by, hopefully in July, August, I'll get about 500 miles a month in the summer months, because that would combine the long ride. I might do a triple bypass or might do a century. So that easily adds to the mileage. And then usually August, you start to ramp down, like you've done all the rides, and so motivation is a little low. So, but then you're also changing seasons, you start to think about skiing. And so, yeah, it's just the cycle of the seasons, if you will, in Colorado.
Yeah, we need to have a separate session on your skiing. That's a whole topic by itself. It's a whole topic by itself. So that's a great tip, actually. So you said you do spinning, which is a great way for folks who want to get fit to ride bicycles. And here in Houston and in the southern states here, we have the MS 150 that usually happens around April, May. And so there is a ride that goes from Houston to Austin. It's about a 150-mile ride. A lot of folks train for that. So and that's through the country. Throughout the country, there are these kind of rides. So folks, so what I think is a great tip that people who want to start training for a summer ride can start doing spinning sometime in early winter or late winter, and then start building up miles on the road as the weather gets a little warmer, right? That's
Absolutely. Oh, spin class, a spin class I discovered is pretty intense. 1 hour at a spinning studio. Again, it's like as competitive as you want to make it, but if you're out there and you see the trainer, you see 50 other people in the class, and you have this big screen kind of showing, all of the measurement, right? Measurement of any metric, whether it's miles per hour, average miles per hour, your cadence, your heart rate, or these days the most popular thing is wattage. So everybody likes to measure power in terms of watts, right, that you're generating, and that's probably the truest measure for your overall fitness and overall skill level on a bicycle. And so seeing that on the screen with 50 other people, and you got a trainer that's yelling into a microphone saying faster, faster, can be quite an experience. I really enjoy that, especially in the winter. It's cold. You go into a spin class, you come out, you feel so good. So I highly recommend spin classes for anybody that's training. It's a fun experience.
right. So let's talk about nutrition. What do you do? Do you do for these kind of, obviously, while bicycling may not be as intense on your body as, let's say, running,
Yeah.
it still is a very intense endeavor when you're taking on these kind of volumes of riding, right? Miles. So what do you do different from a nutrition perspective?
Okay, nutrition, this is a favorite topic, if you will, amongst us friends, or some of the guys that I ride my bike with, right? Because I don't think it's a one size fits all, okay? As much as, you get recommendations and tips from your friends, it's not necessarily going to work for you, right? Everybody's body is a little different. Everybody expends energy a little different. Their needs are a little different. So for me, I found that, nutrition is a little bit of a trial and error. Because you might get a recommendation and then you have it and you get out and start riding and you end up with an upset stomach, right? And that's going to ruin your day again. So I try to keep it light. When I go on like 100-mile ride, which is the triple bypass is a 9-hour ride for me, right? So I'm on my bike. I start at 5:30 and I go through to whatever 3 o'clock and so you basically you start with some breakfast to get you going, and then you have 8 stations along the way that provide all kinds of nutrition. So from sandwiches to something even heavier to peanut PBJs or fruits or whatever, right? So there's some food that I tend to carry for myself, like I carry this. I don't know if you can see this. This is an RX bar.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically protein, so if you see this, it's got egg whites, some nuts, some dates, and the bottom line is it says no bullshit, right? So anyway, that over time I found that works really well for me. I could have one of those and keep me going for another 2 to 3 hours. Of course, I'll do fruits, I'll do oranges, I'll do light cookies, or I'll do PBJs, and then I carry these with me. This is a company out of England, I think, or somewhere in Europe. It's called SIS, Science in Sport, and these guys make electrolyte tablets. Okay, so I'll carry about 4 or 5 with me on long rides, and I just throw a tablet into my water bottle, and what it does is it supplements sodium, right? Because sodium, you lose a lot of sodium on long days out in the saddle. So helps me from cramping and that kind of thing. So so that's my go-to nutrition when I ride. The day before, I try and drink quite a lot of water just to make sure that I'm well hydrated. In fact, for long rides, I'll start working my way. If I'm doing a long ride on Saturday, like a 120-mile ride, then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, start ramping up my water intake. Coconut water is another favorite of mine because of potassium. It delivers a very high amount of potassium, which again keeps things going quite well, and it's natural. So those are my recommendations. Again, that's what works for me. I'm not saying it works for everybody. I know that for my friends, I have, so Jiva, you met Jiva. Jiva, his salt needs are much, much higher. So he carries a lot more salt tablets with him than I do. Right? So again, everybody's a little different. For me, if I have those, then I get an upset stomach. So you just have to figure out what works for you.
Right.
But to your point, I think nutrition is very key to your success on the day off. And it can be a record-breaking day for you, or it could be really bad if you don't plan that. But yeah,
right.
There's a lot of good stuff out there. There's the good thing is, like everything else, cycling has a lot of good forums. Where you can go read up and learn about other people's experiences. If you go to REI, which is where I do a lot of my shopping, a lot of people there advise you. So again, you learn, but then you don't experiment on the day off. You do what you do.
Right. No, that's a great tip, that whatever you do during your training is what you stick to during the day of the ride. And I think what you just said is, during the training season, you pretty much use the same products. What about off-ride nutrition? Do you do anything special in between training sessions?
Yeah, I do. One thing that I've gotten, if I do a long ride, like anything above 50 miles is a long day, right? Mm-hmm. That means I've burned a lot of, calories. I've kind of expended some good effort. And to recover, I usually, within the first hour after I come back, I drink a pretty tall glass of chocolate milk. Mm. And for me, I find that does wonders for just the muscle recovery. I feel good pretty quick the next day or the day after. Otherwise, I don't do anything special. I try not to drink beer the day of the ride, even though I've finished the ride. It's very tempting, but it's also, I end up with a bad headache because of, again, it's like the opposite spectrums, right? You burned a lot of energy. Even though the beer looks very inviting, it ruins my evening. So I try not to do that. I wait a day or so before kind of getting back to alcohol. But food-wise, I've never been a disciplined food person. I like all the bad stuff. So I like fries and burgers and But luckily for me, I've managed to keep off the weight somehow. So. But again, I don't overdo it, but, I also don't plan too much about, what I'm eating. Usually for the 2-3 days before the ride, I'll watch it. I won't go crazy. We got into a habit of, there used to be this term called carb loading years ago, but I don't even do that anymore. I just eat normal. And I find that doing that is the best. Normal dinner, normal breakfast works for me.
Cool. All right. So you do this, you do the training, you take care of yourself. Now tell us about what is the triple bypass. Why is it called triple bypass?
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Colorado is a great place with a lot of mountains, right? And so we have some milestone, I don't know if it's milestone, but we have some roads that kind of climb to great heights. I think the tallest contiguous road in North America is in Colorado. The highest paved road in North America is in Colorado, right? So there's a road at 14,000 feet in elevation. So you're bound to, when you have a road like that, you're bound to want to try and climb it. Okay, and so the triple bypass itself is basically going over 3 mountain passes. Okay, so the first mountain pass is called I think it's called Squaw Pass, and second one's called Loveland Pass. The third one is Whale Pass. And if you talk to anybody in Colorado, these are household names. I mean, they'll know these pretty easily. First, the Squaw Pass is at about 10,500 feet, or maybe even 11,000 feet. So you start off at about, say, 6,000 feet in elevation. You ride up and over the 11,000 feet, then you kind of ride back down to about 7. And then there's a long slog up over Loveland Pass, which is about 12,000 feet. And then you kind of come back down to about 8,000. And then the third pass is again at 10,500. So end to end, the ride is about 10,000 plus feet of climbing. And that in and of itself isn't bad, but because some of the elevations are above 10,000 feet, where there's considerably less oxygen, you can feel, the effects of high altitude. You really feel that. You feel lightheaded a little bit, and so putting out that type of effort to go over these passes is hard. But it's a very popular ride. It's been around for like more than 30 years now, and people come from all over the country to do it. In fact, some people come from outside of the country, like Europe and places. They sign up and ride it. So recently, about 7 or 8 years ago, so basically the ride starts just on the outskirts of Denver at a place called Evergreen. And it goes all the way to this place called Avon, which is in the mountains, it's near Vail. About 7, 8 years ago, I think, or maybe even longer, they started this whole idea of doing a double triple. So the triple is go 3 passes this way. The double triple is the next day on Sunday, you turn around and ride back.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's about, the total distance is 120 miles each way, 10,000 feet of climbing. And so if you do the double triple, you've done 250 miles and you've climbed about 20,000 feet. So I've done it once. In fact, we signed up to do it this year, but because of coronavirus, they canceled the ride. But we were all training to do the double triple this year. And, it's a nasty, tough ride, but feels good after you've done.
Okay. And so what is the kind of volume you do for this kind of training? So 240 miles, how much do you peak at for your long distance rides?
Yeah, so, that's a very good question, because I'll tell you, my challenge with cycling is, during the week, I cannot get literally any miles. So I'll get some miles on an indoor bicycle. If I'm very disciplined, I'll maybe get, 15 to 20 miles each time I get on an indoor bicycle, right? And with simulated climbs. So it's not the real thing, but but it's still just 1 hour, each time. So 3 hours during the week. In order for me to really train well, I have to do this over the weekends, right? And even the weekends, it's hard to get both days. So Saturday is the day I reserve for, just being out there riding, okay? Because, in order to train well, you need, I'll say 5 to 6 hours every Saturday. So you get enough distance, you get to go out and climb and, all that fun stuff. So that limited of a time frame available to you, basically talking 4 days in a month, you're not going to get a lot of mileage. Okay, so whatever mileage you get, you got to make it count. And so that's why climbing is very, very important. So more than the actual miles, I'll say I try and get approximately 20,000 feet of climbing every month at a minimum, so that when July arrives, I can feel comfortable about doing 10,000 feet of climbing in one day, right? So that's probably my biggest challenge. For me, I just cannot get enough miles in. So with all of that said, to come back to your question, I usually try to get to about 1,500 miles before the 15th of July. So starting January 1st through 15th of July, 6.5 months, I'll try to get 1,500 miles.
Terrific. So one other thing I wanted to check with you was about biking also requires a certain kind of special clothing, right? Apparels, especially these kind of long rides. Uh,
So not unlike anything else, Santosh, I think technology in clothing, in general, I'll say technology is a big aid, to support your hobby, your passion, right? And there are some that may poo-poo technology and say, oh, I can write my T-shirt, blah blah blah. But I think that once you've experienced the benefits of lycra, right, which is really the material that goes into most um, jerseys and bib shorts and that sort of stuff, you'll then realize, okay, this thing is, made my 9 hours on the saddle possible, because it wicks away all the sweat and the moisture, uh, and more, it adds to the comfort, because sitting on a saddle for 9 hours, you know, you you can imagine, how sore you're going to feel.
yeah,
And me, these the bibs and the technology that goes into these clothes make that so much more bearable. So absolutely, of course, those things again can be ludicrously priced, right? So it's not like going off and buying a $20 T-shirt. So you kind of want to watch, wait for the sales. But again, you don't have to break the bank, and the good news is you don't need hundreds of those. You just need a few that you can recycle. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Because I remember when I started bicycling, I didn't have any of those special apparels, and as one started cycling, you started appreciating the value of course, for non-cyclists, we all look like Superman on a saddle, right? Most non-cyclists are look at those spandex guys and gals, right? But hey, it makes you look cool.
yeah,
Get all of a nice, coolers and put on your helmet. You look like those mean machines riding those streets.
yeah.
Looks good. Why not, right?
No, absolutely. No, they do serve a good purpose for sure.
Yeah.
So, I'm a big believer in, because I've also bought stuff that I paid a lot of money for that, don't either fit you right or don't work as well. So it's not so much about the cost of it. It's about, really how well it's made and how they fit you, because that can, again, like everything else, make your day that much better.
Yeah. Great. No, this was a fantastic conversation. I hope people who listen to this get an insight on what it takes to do something like you've done. Obviously, it's a phenomenal effort and achievement on your end to have done these kind of rides, and hopefully it inspires a few people to go out there and hit the bike. Um, Before we kind of bring this conversation to close, is there anything else you want to add, Sriram?
Let's see, I had made some notes. Let me see. No, I think it asked about, core principles. For me, really, core principles: have fun doing what you're doing and explore, right? That's what drives, and America is a big, beautiful country. And, it's amazing to me, the opportunity we all have. I mean, in just about every corner of America, to explore. Okay. I think nobody will disagree with the quality of roads, the back roads, the vistas, and the people. There's just so much I feel very grateful for living here. I've ridden in a few states, of course, mostly in Colorado, but I got to tell you that if America doesn't, the land of America doesn't inspire you to get out there and see it, I don't know what can. So for me, just exploring the US has been a lot of fun. My dream is to go and explore Europe. There are, again, great places in Europe, like whether it's Belgium or Spain or France or Italy. Would love to go out there. So I got a big bucket list of places that I want to go and ride. But again, it's all about exploring, seeing places, meeting people, and enjoying. Let's see, what else did I have? I think we covered nutrition. So for the beginners, again, take baby steps. I think I would tell people that don't get intimidated when people talk mileage, because you can go from 0 to 5 in 2 days and 5 to 25 in 12 days, right? It's just literally that easy. And so I always tell the story of how I couldn't climb the ramp. The first time I had to get off and push my bike. And that's my story for beginners. You know, you got to try it before you decide whether this is for you or not. And most often, everybody that rides a bike will tell you the joy of riding a bike. Nothing comes close. So.
Great. I think, if time permits, we would like to have you back for for skiing. Talk about your skiing adventures, probably closer to when the skiing season starts.
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole can of worms.
Yeah, no, it's this again. It's one more thing that you can take to extreme lengths. Yeah.
All right, Sriram, thanks a lot. It was fantastic having this conversation.